Hello there. Welcome to Rally Sport Magazine's special stage podcast for another week. Peter Whitten, it's nice to have you along with me.
Luke, how are you doing this week?
Doing good, thank you. Nice to follow along on a World Rally Championship round at the weekend. Chile, I've said a few times in the podcast, it reminded me of Australian roads, and I was very happy to hear some drivers mention that as well at the weekend. Did you enjoy the rally?
I did enjoy it very much, actually, and it was quite interesting that of the three legs of the rally, they were all quite different in their nature and their road characteristics. Even yesterday, watching the final stages, a couple of them live and then later on, they were quite a lot different to what we'd experienced in the first 2 days.
Absolutely right. They were talking about that in the lead up, of course. Day 1, day 2, and day 3 were completely different. And that's what I think a lot of people would really like about Chile, the fact that it's so different on each day and also different to what other rounds of the World Rally Championship are like. You can't really compare it to a Portugal or Sardinia. I know Kenya is completely left field when it comes to World Rally Championship events, but there's nothing really comparable.
No, you're right. And I guess one of the things for us Aussies and us down under is the fact that we probably don't know anything about rallying in Chile. So to see those different stages and the conditions across the weekend was a really good thing to see. And I'm sure we'll get into the tyre wear stuff later on, but it was a fantastic event and really enthralling to watch it over the weekend.
Enthralling to watch it, but unfortunately, if you were wanting sleep over the weekend, it was a hard one to follow. The first stage for our time in Australia here was just after 9 o'clock typically, and if you're in New Zealand, it's after 11 o'clock. So maybe a few late nights were had across the weekend, but we followed along as much as what we could, and an M Sport win for Tanak was clearly a really, really popular win.
It sure was, and I think the power stage was 3 a.m. Monday morning Australian time, and what would have been 5 a.m. Kiwi time. So, yeah, as you say, very tough to watch. But wasn't it fantastic to see Tanak finally have some luck? I mean, he won back in February, nearly 8 months ago in Sweden, and it's taken this long for him to get on the podium again.
Yeah, it's been a long, long time, and it was a flawless weekend. He came out, he won stages early on Friday. He got a good road position for Saturday, picked the right tyres for Saturday, and then cruised through on Sunday to win. I don't know what they could do much better. It's just a shame that it's come this late in the season.
It is, yeah, it certainly is. And when you look through Oit's results, and I'll correct myself there, he did get a second in round 4 of the championship, so it's his third podium of the year. But apart from, I mean, I think in Italy he finished way back in 35th. He didn't finish in Finland, I should say. And most other events, he's been sort of within the top 6, but there's always been some mechanical issues that have hampered him. And apart from a spin early on in Chile, I mean, I don't think Tanak has put a mark on that car all year. And when you look at some of the other drivers, it's a very impressive feat.
And I think one of the things that he's had to contend with this year is a car that hasn't been optimum for him and really for anybody over the past couple of years. Craig Breen had his troubles with it last year, as did guys like Formo and Greensmith throughout last year. And Tanak's grabbed a hold of it this year, tried to adjust it to his liking, and found that it's, again, a hard car to drive and adjust to your liking.
It is, I would imagine, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure the car is a lot better now than what it was back at the start of 2023.
Yeah.
When you look at the results, though, for this year, and as much as we say and we probably believe that M Sport and Tanak have had pretty much of a disastrous year, he's the only driver other than a Toyota driver to have won more than one rally. I mean, you look at Thierry Neuville from Hyundai, he's only won the once. Tanak has now won twice, and both Ogier and Rovanpera have won 3 times. There's been no other driver apart from Neuville or a Toyota that's won an event this year.
It's just that consistency, isn't it? Consistency from guys like Kelly Rovanpera have been there all the time throughout the hybrid era, both last year and this year. And that's really what gets you championships. If Tanak's going to retire from this event, finished in 8th, and then come back and win, he's never going to win a title. And that's partly his fault, and it's partly M Sport's fault. I guess the car's has struggled.
It's interesting what you say about Tanak and M Sport, and while there's been quite a lot of discussion, at least rumour mill type discussion about Tanak perhaps going back to Hyundai next year, we still don't know whether that's going to be the case or not. All that I can gather from any of that is that from watching some of the interviews and the body language and stuff over the weekend in Chile, Tanak seemed to be really settled and happy with the M Sport team. There was some good interaction with Rich Milner, the team boss, when they were doing some interviews. All the stuff at the podium finish with the team was really promising as far as Tanak remaining with the team goes. But I guess it all comes down to money at the end of the day and whether M Sport can afford to have Tanak for another season.
That's true. I found it a little bit different, and I'd read some of those situations a little bit differently than perhaps what you did. But he might seem happy on the podium, and he might seem chatty with Rich Milner, but he's had a relationship with Rich for years and years and years now. To be almost, in fact, over 10 years that he's been in a relationship with Rich and M Sport and the team there. And yeah, I don't know whether it's all quite as rosy as what you may think it is, because the car just hasn't done the job this year. And is it going to do the job again next year? It's hard to know.
Perhaps we need to maybe look at the Tanak situation as a bit like Sebastian Ogier. I mean, clearly Ogier is in the best car, but he's certainly probably the best driver still out there. And when he's competing, and if he did compete in a full championship, he would have to be the favourite to win. Maybe that's the situation with Tanak. Does he want to go back and chase a full championship again to try and win every event, or is he more inclined to stick with a team like M Sport where it's more of a family atmosphere, I guess, where the media pressures aren't as much as what they would be with Hyundai or Toyota? Of course, that's only for up to him to know, but that's one of the considerations, I guess, that he needs to think about moving forward.
Elsewhere across the M Sport field was the unfortunate accident of Pierre-Louis Loubet. From what looks to be a co-driver issue or a miscommunication between driver and co-driver that caused that accident. It was very shortly after Esa-Pekka Lappi crashed on Friday at the end of the opening stage. It brings us to Hyundai and their unfortunate weekend. And although Thierry Neuville was second overall, Timo Sünninen's crash, as well as Lappi, as I just mentioned, it was a pretty bad weekend.
Yeah, I got to feel really sorry for Timo Sünningen. I mean, he put in a superb performance, really. I mean, he was in second place coming up to that last stage when he did crash. And yeah, okay, it's a crash, but in reality, he clipped a corner a little bit too tight. There was a tree stump on the inside which broke the steering, and that put him off the road. So it's not a big crash like a Lappi or a Loubet that happened on the weekend. I don't really think that will have done Suninen's chances of a drive next year any harm. As far as Lappi and Loubet are concerned, yeah, let's wait and see. Lappi's was another crash that I don't know. Does that sort of, is that a significant part of his career that he seems to have some good results and then some big accidents? He clearly earlier this year he was capable of winning most events and got quite a few podiums, but it's gone pretty pear-shaped since then.
It has, and it was perhaps an accident that didn't need to happen. It's the last corner of the first stage. I say it didn't need to happen. All accidents don't need to happen, and nobody's trying to crash the car, but it's the first stage of a long, long rally, and he's got bigger picture things to think about. I'm not sure whether he has a contract for next year with Hyundai. He's got to be able to deliver results, and his countryman has come in and shown that he can deliver results. He's delivered a fifth and a fourth, and was well on track for a second place finish before his demise at the weekend. And yeah, I don't know where it leaves Lappi. Does it leave Lappi below Suninen? Probably not, in my opinion, considering the amount of events he's done in that car. We'll see.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And as I said, it does sort of characterise Lappi's career a bit. I mean, he was at M Sport and had some ups and downs there. The similar stuff at Citroen as well. So let's wait and see. But as far as Pierre-Louis Loubet is concerned, yeah, wasn't that a big crash? I mean, from watching the onboard footage, it appeared that the pace note call was a left over a crest rather than a right over a crest, and he went off the road without even attempting to slow down. Let me just say too, with Loubet, I don't know where that puts his career. I mean, he started with M Sport last year after a bad time with Hyundai in their World Rally car. He had some good stage times and some good results last year with the Puma. This year has gone very, very badly for him. I mean, he's hardly scored any World Championship points this year. I'm just not sure that M Sport can hang on to him for another year, particularly with drivers of the ilk of Sami Piari, Oliver Solberg, those sort of guys that are still in the mix.
Adrian Formeau as well is probably primed to get back into a Rally 1 car, given his great year this year. Toyota, they had a tough weekend as well by their standards, which are incredibly high. Only one person on the podium is almost not good enough in many ways. It was partly caused by a bad tyre choice on Saturday. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so obviously the second day of the rally, most of the teams, because it was a very early start on Saturday morning, I think the first stage was 7 a.m. There was a bit of dust hanging on the stages on that stage, and Toyota in particular obviously thought that the conditions were going to be a lot more damp than they were. As it turned out, there was lots of dust. There was a hard packed surface, lots of road clearing and rocks, and Toyota went with basically an all soft compound selection for their tyres for both. Well, sorry, for all three cars, and it backfired badly. So by the end of the third stage on the second day, I think the stages were 22 kilometers, I don't know, 15 kilometers, and then 28 kilometers, and Evans and Rovanpera and Katsuda all finished with bald tyres on the back and lost time and any chance of a win.
And in comparison, Tanak's tyres were clearly worn, but they weren't anywhere near as bald as what the Toyotas were. So it was that pressure release and that time gap that he was able to get that really set up the win for the Estonian.
It was, and it's probably an uncharacteristic error from Toyota as well. I mean, you would think that having all three cars on the same tyre is a team decision, and I think Tanak did say later on that even his choice of running 4 hards and taking 2 soft tyres as spares was a bit of a tricky one for him. He wasn't sure whether he should have taken the soft tyres at all, and obviously that proved to be correct. And the fortunate part for Toyota, and I guess the silver lining was for them, was that they actually wrapped up the Manufacturers' Championship, which became possible rather after Timo Sunonen crashed on the last stage.
I find it hard how two different teams can have such differing tyre choices when it comes to just one loop of stages. M Sport clearly went with the right package, and Toyota completely went the opposite direction. I'm not sure how, say, Toyota can get that so badly wrong when there's so much investment and infrastructure that goes into planning everything from tyre choices and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and looking at the onboard footage from the stages when they were running, I mean, it was clear that everything was very dry. There was lots of loose gravel. There was lots of rocks that could damage tyres and rip the tread apart. Perhaps, as we might have mentioned, that M Sport Ford also had Alberto Heller running as a privateer in the Puma Rally 1. He's a local Chilean driver, and clearly he's got lots of experience of the Chile roads and the Chile stages. So maybe that information and the information that he gave them was really vital in the end.
I think it might have been. Next round of the World Rally Championship is the Central European Rally across 3 countries in clearly Central Europe, as the name describes. Austria, the Czech Republic, and also Germany are a part of the event. Do you know much about that one, Peter? And it's another tarmac event, but from days gone past, Germany's always been a great event. So if that's anything to go by, we've got some good stages to watch.
Yeah, I think it's another event that's new to the championship, and we're all looking forward to it. Yeah, it's a tarmac event, and most of us rally heads probably listening to this podcast today are gravel fans. But a new event is always good because everyone starts on a level playing field, and making the pace notes from scratch is going to be the toughest part of the event, and is going to be key to the result that everybody gets. And sure, it does mean that a Pierre-Louis Loubet or a Timo Sunonen, if he's running, or any of those other guys, can actually have as much chance of winning as a Rovanpera or a Tanak.
We've had a couple of Australians overseas at the weekend. Molly Spaulding and Matt Dillon were victorious in Malaysia for Team Australia. They took home the gold medal in the rally discipline of the Asia Pacific Motorsport Championship. The rally competition was a modified version, so it wasn't a gravel rally in the true sense, but it was a rally event nonetheless, and our congratulations must go to them for bringing home the gold amongst a whole number of different Australians who took part in karting championships, esports championships, and many other genres across the vast world of motorsport. Elsewhere, State Round was run and won in Western Australia. Safari Rally was won by Dylan King and Lee Tierney in an Evolution 9 Mitsubishi. Daniel Gonzalez and Alex Rouleau were second and third in their Rally 2 cars. It was almost a quiet weekend, Peter. There's been a few weekends over the past month or 2 months that we've had 2, 3, and even 4 major events in Australia. It was a bit quiet this weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was motorsport wise, and it was fantastic that we had Rally Chile to watch. But I guess all those people who are fans of the ball sports would have been watching the AFL Grand Final on Saturday and the NRL Grand Final on Sunday night. So plenty of sport on TV to keep you going.
And the motorsport heads obviously get their big day next week, particularly those who like circuit racing with the Bathurst 1000 next weekend. It'll be a big weekend there. And of course, the Bathurst Rally was held not too long ago as part of the New South Wales Rally Championship. We mentioned Molly Spalding and Matt Dillon. They were overseas last weekend. Taylor Gill and Dan Brick are in Europe permanently this year. They've got their second weekend of rallying in a fortnight. They're going to Estonia. So they're almost a home event for them. They're living in Finland, so they're traveling to Estonia for the Sarima rally. They're up against Oit Tanak, although Oit's in a different class. Taylor and Dan will be hoping for another clean result and some more experience on those tricky, fast stages.
Yeah, and it's great to see them back on the gravel again. The last couple of events for them have been on tarmac, and they've made some huge strides forward in their pace noting ability and their writing of notes and reading of notes. But back on the gravel in Estonia this weekend, and yeah, as you say, Oit Tanak will be there, not in a Rally 1 car, but in a Rally 2 car, so a Fiesta Rally 2. And I think he's got Robert Verves, who's co-driving, who's also a top-line Estonian rally driver. So it's almost like the combination of Latvala and Hannanen competing together for Toyota. So it'll be good to see. But yeah, all the best to Taylor and Dan this weekend in what I think is round 4 of the FIA Rally Star Series.
That's correct. So they've done one gravel rally to start. They've done a couple of tarmac events after that, and then the gravel rally in Estonia this weekend. It'll be good for them to see where their speed is at. There's a couple of good Rally 3 drivers that are on the entry list. And of course, they'll be able to compare their speed versus Oit Tanak, who is one of the class drivers in the world. They'll be able to compare where a Rally 3 should sit in terms of pace against the top Rally 2 car and get a bit of a gauge as to where they sit. The Valley Stages, Peter, you attended that, or it'll be 10 days ago now, in the beautiful region of Yarra Glen and the Yarra Valley, just sort of northeast of Melbourne there. The stages really bring back some memories of times gone by, and we just sort of wanted to touch on a few of those old Rally of Melbourne memories. And this week, in fact, is 20 years since Simon Evans won that famous 2003 Rally of Melbourne fight where it was so close.
It was, yeah. And before we get to the Rally Melbourne stuff, Luke, we need to mention Troy Dowell, who won every stage of the Valley stages, all 10 stages in his Rally 2 Fiesta. A brilliant drive with Bernie Webb. Congratulations to him. And his dad, Justin Dowell, the 2011 Australian Rally Championship winner, was back on the entry list again and ended up clinching the Victorian Rally Championship. So a fantastic weekend for the Dowell family.
From not competing at the first round of the state series to winning it it's quite a good turnaround for Justin. So he's obviously whet the appetite for some more rallying, and I can see his name on the entry list for the Adelaide Hills Rally in a few weekends' time. So more seat time for him and more development for that Mitsubishi Mirage G4 car that is coming along, I'm sure, in leaps and bounds for the active rally sport team.
Yeah, and it was a great effort by Justin. And interestingly, when I spoke to him at the midpoint service during the Valley Stages event, he was about to withdraw. He said the car had no drive. He thought it had broken the front diff and it was a handful to drive. Yet he was still in about 4th place at that time. So the team worked really hard, managed to get the car going again, and out he went again and clinched the championship. So fantastic. And bad luck too for Brendan Reeves, who headed into the event, I guess, as the favourite to win the Victorian Rally Championship, driving his Datsun 1600, and looked on track to do that until some engine issues late in the event sort of pushed him down the leaderboard on the second heat. So Brendo ended up finishing second in the Victorian Championship, with Tim and Leonie Clark taking 3rd place in their Subaru.
Memories of Rally of Melbourne. It's a great event, and it's one of the first rallies that I ever remember attending long ago. You would have been to nearly all of those Rally of Melbournes. Before we cover off on them all in general, that 2003 event was pretty impressive. It was at that time where Group N was really the number one thing in the world. It was bringing everybody so close together. Privateers had a chance. The numerous factory teams had a chance. It was at that event as well that Toyota was obviously developing their Group NP Corolla. It marked the first time that the car had been to an event for the second time. And when Simon Evans got on that top step of the podium, it was at long last and really a well-deserved win.
He was a cult hero, Simon Evans, particularly in that black and silver Hella Subaru that he drove so spectacularly. And Simon and Sue back in the day, they were a force to be reckoned with against the factory cars, no matter which event they went to. Their privateer status often meant that they didn't have the resources and the funding to match it with the factory cars all the time. But on home soil, they came through with the goods. And yeah, it was a great memory, that event. I can remember it fondly.
And one thing also is to think about is tyres. They were on Yokohama tyres, and in my research for the podcast, I spotted the press release from Yokohama about them beating the might of the factory teams. They were the first pairing and car to win a round of the Super Series from outside a factory car. So it was even all the more impressive, and particularly given they'd have had such struggles the year before and they'd almost won the rally, to be heartbreakingly missing out on it that year, to come back and win the year after was just reward.
Yeah, and sadly, Yokohama's a brand that we don't see much in rallying anymore. I mean, we've got well, back in the day when the 2003 event was held, we clearly had Pirelli and Michelin and Dunlop and everybody else. But and while they're still around, we don't often see Yokohama anymore.
Mm. Juha Kangas was another one who was in an Evolution Lancer at that point. He was a great person to have in the championship, and although he was at times a very classic Finn, it was that international flavour that we've got in part from Gandhi Sanders this year as an Indonesian. He's not quite at the speed that Juha was when he got here, but it's nice to be sort of getting back to that point where we can get some internationals into the series, and they bring something extra, don't they?
They do, and Juha was a tremendous fellow. I mean, he was such a nice guy. I remember meeting him for the first time up in Wodonga, I think, when he first came out to Australia. He ended up driving for the Les Walkden team. Looking at some stats just recently, Luke, it appears Juha Kangas hasn't done a rally since 2005, and that last event was the Bathurst Rally at the end of 2005. So I've reached out to Julia Barkley, who was Juha's co-driver in Australia, to see where he is these days. And we're going to try and get in touch with him and do an interview with Juha, because it'd be fantastic to catch up and relive some of those memories.
Yeah, how many years was he here in Australia, Peter? Was it 3 or 4, perhaps, that he was here
Yeah,
competing in Subarus and Evos?
yeah, it was 3. So he started in 2003 in a Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 7. He drove the Evo 7 again in 2004, and then he changed to a Subaru Impreza in 2005. Prior to that, he'd done quite a lot of World Championship stuff back in Europe, driving a Corolla World Rally car. He then moved into a Suzuki Ignis Super 1600 car and did quite a few events in that before coming to Australia. So a fantastic driver, a great personality for the sport. He was really good for the Australian Rally Championship, and yeah, let's hope we can catch up with him soon.
The old Rally of Melbourne roads were amazing, and most of the Victorian Rally Championship is used on those roads. Marysville, Academus, and also the Yarra Valley stages use those roads in that kind of area. But one of the unique things about the Rally of Melbourne was the fact that it used a couple of wineries. Firstly, Domaine Chandon during the 1990s, and then later De Bortoli wines as a special stage and a base, more or less, for the rally. It's a unique thing, and it sort of set it apart from the other rounds.
It did, and it's probably fair to say, Luke, that there hasn't been an event as, I don't know, would you say progressive as what the Rally of Melbourne was back in the 1990s and 2000s? And that was all the mastermind of Glenn Cuthbert, who was the clerk of course of the event. Glenn tragically lost his life in a boating accident at Lake Eildon some years later, so he's not around anymore. But yeah, and I was thinking about this the other day. There was everything that the Rally of Melbourne did. They had a start in Swanston Street in Melbourne at one stage. They did the winery stages. They used some Shire Road stuff that hasn't been used since, like the Acheron Way and Don Road, where the famous spectator point was. So it was a really proactive event and kicked a lot of goals for rallying back in the day. And it's something that we really do miss.
Mount Slide is another one that's a great road, and I know people compete at the Valley stages year after year just to drive that piece of road that is not all that long, but it's a beautiful bit of road.
It sure is, and I went there again this year and stood on the first couple of corners after the start control, and just reminiscing while I was standing there about watching Cody Crocker and Simon Evans and Errol Dinsky and Neil Bates and all those guys, Possum born, competing on that same piece of road 20, 25 years earlier. So it has got some famous history, and it's good that the Valley Stages is using some of those roads. Why they're not using some of the other, the Acheron Way, Don Road type stages, we're going to chase that up as well and do a feature on that coming up.
Absolutely. There's lots of history in Australian rallying and a lot of history that hasn't been touched really. So we're looking forward to uncovering more and more of that history and talking about it from week to week on the podcast, and also running features on our website. You'll need a subscription for the website, of course. We're welcoming new subscriptions as we always are. It helps us to produce the podcast. It helps us to get more content out there. It helps us get to events and give you the latest news and whatnot that we can provide at events. And for subscribers, really, it's the place to be for news and features of our sport. So we're going to uncover some more. Like you said, Peter, Yuha Kangas is on your to-do list. Craig Jarvie, the clerk, of course, of the current Valley Stages, is also on your to-do list to talk about with the Valley Stages and all that kind of stuff. It's lots to discuss, and you're never quiet in a rallying sense, are you?
No, you're not. There's always something to follow up, and news stories to chase, features to write, some history to look back on. It's a wonderful stuff.
Lastly, before we go, the Otago Rally is coming up for next year. And as you might be aware, if you're a frequent listener to the podcast, or if you're frequent the website often, the Otago Tour is what we run every year to the Otago Rally. So this year it's a multi-day, multi-night tour that we can get to spots in the middle of stages. We can talk to organisers. We can do a lot of things that we're really grateful to for the organisers, and the tour is really not to be missed.
Correct, Luke. Yeah, and we've just about finalised all the pricing and the information for the tour, so that should be on the website in the next day or so. So keep an eye out for that. Advise yourself to get in early and make your booking. There's limited positions available, given rooms in the hotel and bus numbers and stuff like that. So, but next year's tour is going to be a fantastic one. The event organisers are still working on their star driver for next year. Negotiations are ongoing, but at this stage, they're still hopeful of getting, I think, an ex-World Rally champion across the line for competing next year. So that'll be fantastic if that happens again. Following on, obviously, last year we had Mikko Hirvonen, we had Mads Osberg, we've had all sorts of world champions and star drivers. So if you're not going over there as a competitor, and lots of Aussies always do, jump on our tour and come and enjoy it with everybody else.
Fantastic. That's a good note to end it on. Keep your eye on the website, on our social media for those notes about our Otago Rally Tour. And until next week, we'll keep you up to date with everything happening and rallying on rallysportmag.com, and we'll talk to you all soon.